When my husband tried to steal my $500 million fortune, he strutted into court with the arrogance of a king, certain I would crawl out penniless. He smirked, mocked, and boasted as if victory was already his. But then I handed the judge a single envelope,
Your
and he
Honor, we have
laughed
the
in my
signed
husband's
affidavit.
face, stripping him bare in front of everyone.
Your
What do
Honor,
you
we have
think
the
was
signed
inside?
affidavit.
This is the story of a woman whose betrayal was answered not with tears, but with a humiliation so brutal her husband never recovered. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request, please. Subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. People said Evelyn Carter had it all: a handsome husband, a grand home with tall white pillars, a fortune that could buy anything. And every time Richard held her hand at charity galas or leaned close to whisper something in her ear, cameras clicked and strangers sighed. That's real love. Evelyn let them believe it. She even forced herself to believe it sometimes. But love inside the Carter mansion was only for the stage lights. Behind the heavy front doors, she lived a different life. Richard Carter knew how to charm the world, but with Evelyn, he showed his teeth. "Don't slouch," Richard said one morning as they sat at the long breakfast table. His voice was cold, sharp as glass. "Do you know how pathetic you look when you hunch like that? Like a nervous schoolgirl. Sit up straight." Evelyn pushed her shoulders back. She didn't argue. She never did when he spoke to her like that. Richard shook his head. "God, you're hopeless. And don't put so much cream in your coffee. You'll gain weight, and then what will people say? I didn't marry you to watch you turn into your mother." Evelyn's cheeks burned. Her mother had been heavy-set, gentle, and the kindest person Evelyn had ever known. She wanted to defend her, but Richard's eyes were on her like knives. "Yes, Richard," she said softly. He smirked, satisfied. Later that evening, they attended a gala for the hospital board. Richard played his part like an actor on stage. He held Evelyn's hand, kissed her cheek, and introduced her to everyone with shining praise. "My wife, Evelyn," he said proudly, "the light of my life. The reason I work so hard." People admired them, complimented them. Evelyn smiled politely, feeling like a mannequin with painted lips. Inside, she wondered if anyone saw through the mask. Clara, Evelyn's younger sister, was at the event too. She leaned close to Evelyn and whispered, "You look stunning tonight." "Honestly, I don't know how you do it," keeping up with Richard's energy. Evelyn forced a small smile. "Thank you, Clara." "I try." Richard overheard and laughed. "Try? Don't flatter her, Clara. Evelyn doesn't try at all. She just follows along like always." Clara laughed politely, but Evelyn noticed something strange in her sister's eyes. Admiration for Richard mixed with something darker, something almost hungry. That night, Evelyn lay awake in bed, while Richard scrolled through his phone beside her. She turned toward him. "Richard, I need to ask you something." He didn't look up. "What now?" "I heard something from a friend. She said she saw you at the hotel last week, with a younger woman." Her voice shook, but she tried to keep it calm. Richard finally looked at her. His smile was cruel. "You're paranoid. Always paranoid. You hear one rumor and suddenly I'm the villain? Grow up, Evelyn. No wonder people think you're fragile." "I'm not fragile," she whispered. "Yes, you are," he said. "You're weak, and you're lucky I put up with it." He turned back to his phone, leaving Evelyn staring at the ceiling. Her heart cracked a little more that night, but she swallowed her tears. Crying in front of him was like handing him a weapon. A week later, Evelyn got her answer without asking. She saw Richard herself in the parking lot of an upscale restaurant. He was laughing with a young woman, touching her hair, kissing her cheek. When he noticed Evelyn across the lot, his smile vanished. But he didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. At home, she tried again. "I saw you, Richard. Don't deny it this time." He threw his jacket onto the chair and snapped, "You saw me having dinner." "Big deal. Do you think you own me, Evelyn? Do you think your money means you get to control me?" Her voice cracked. "I'm your wife." You're my burden, he spat, and if you keep running your mouth, you'll regret it. Evelyn stood frozen, too shocked to reply. Richard stormed upstairs, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. 2 days later, Evelyn's world shattered further. She went to Clara's house unannounced, hoping for a sister's comfort. Instead, she stopped short at the sound of voices in the kitchen. Richard's voice. Clara's voice. She's so easy to handle, Richard was saying. All it takes is a little pressure, and she folds. The world thinks she's strong, but she's nothing. Clara giggled. I almost feel sorry for her. Don't. Once we're done, she'll be lucky to keep her name. I'll take control of the company shares through the trust, and she won't even see it coming. Evelyn's blood turned cold. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stop herself from gasping. Just remember your role, Richard continued. His voice was cruel, sharp. You play the supportive sister. Make her think you're on her side. And if anyone questions her, you back me up. You say she's unstable, paranoid, unfit. Understood? Yes, Richard, Clara said, her voice soft with a strange kind of submission. Good girl, Richard said, his tone dripping with control. Don't mess this up. Evelyn staggered backward, heart pounding. Her husband, her sister, together, planning to destroy her. The world thought she was the luckiest woman alive. But inside, Evelyn knew the truth. She was living in a prison built of lies, cruelty, and betrayal. Evelyn's hands shook as she slipped out of Clara's back door. The night air was cool, but her face burned with shame and fury. She could barely breathe. Her husband, the man who told the world he adored her, was plotting her destruction, and Clara, her own sister, was smiling through it. She drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Inside her chest, anger warred with heartbreak. How long had they been meeting like this? How long had Clara been pretending to care while secretly planning Evelyn's ruin? The next morning, Richard acted as if nothing was wrong. He strolled into the kitchen, kissed Evelyn's cheek, and said, Good morning, sweetheart, in the same cheerful voice he used in public. Evelyn wanted to scream. Instead, she poured him coffee. 2 sugars, he said, taking the cup without a thank you. He sipped, grimaced, and slammed it down. God, you can't even make coffee right. Do you do anything right, Evelyn? She blinked back tears. I'm trying. Trying doesn't cut it. Do you know how exhausting it is to live with you? Always so fragile, always on edge. I need a wife who lifts me up, not drags me down. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, leaving her trembling by the counter. Later that week, Clara came by. She hugged Evelyn at the door, her smile wide and sweet. You look pale, sis. Are you eating enough? You know you need to take care of yourself. Evelyn studied Clara's face, searching for guilt, but all she saw was polished concern. I'm fine, Evelyn said flatly. Clara tilted her head. Are you? Because Richard says you've been struggling lately, forgetful, emotional, maybe even a little unstable. I just want to help. The words sliced through Evelyn. So it was starting already, the story they planned to spread. She forced a tight smile. Thank you, Clara. I appreciate your concern. That night, Evelyn heard them again. She was walking past Richard's study when voices leaked through the door. She paused, heart racing. Richard's tone was harsh, impatient. No, Clara, you don't get to make demands. Do you think I'd ever leave Evelyn for you? Don't be stupid, Clara's voice trembled. But you said... I said what I needed to say to keep you useful, Richard snapped. Don't fool yourself. You're nothing but a pawn in this game. You'll do as I say, or you'll get nothing. There was silence, then Clara whispered, I've done everything for you. I've lied for you. I've covered for you. Richard laughed coldly. And you'll keep doing it because you want me too much. Don't pretend otherwise. You envy your sister. You always have. Well, now you can finally beat her, but only if you obey me. Clara said nothing. Evelyn could almost hear her breathing, heavy and uneven, caught between shame and desire. Richard's voice dropped lower. Now stop whining. And remember, if you screw this up, I'll bury you along with her. Evelyn's chest ached. Betrayal twisted deeper. Not only had Clara turned against her, but Richard treated Clara with the same cruelty he showed his wife. He was using her too, crushing her pride while pulling her into his scheme. Evelyn crept away from the study before they noticed her. In her bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked hollow, her skin pale. She whispered to herself, "How did I get here? How did I let this happen?" The next evening, they attended another dinner party. Evelyn walked beside Richard, silent, while he dazzled the crowd with stories and laughter. Clara joined them halfway through the night, sliding easily into the role of doting sister. To outsiders, they looked perfect, a loving couple with a loyal sister by their side. People toasted to them, smiled at them, admired them. But Evelyn's ears rang with Richard's cruel words, Clara's fake sympathy, and the sound of her own breaking heart. At one point, a friend leaned over and whispered, "You're so lucky, Evelyn." "Richard is such a good man," Evelyn forced a smile. Inside, she thought, if only you knew. Back home after midnight, Richard poured himself a drink. Evelyn tried to retreat upstairs quietly, but his voice stopped her. "You know," he said, swirling the glass, "people think you're the reason we're respected. But they don't know the truth. Without me, you'd just be some rich girl hiding behind your daddy's money. I made you." Don't forget that Evelyn turned slowly. "You made me?" "Yes," he sneered. "I gave you status, charm, a husband people admire. And what do I get in return? A boring wife who doesn't even know how to keep a man satisfied. Do you think I don't notice how stiff you are? How dull you've become? Men like me deserve more." Her throat tightened. "So that's why you cheat." He smiled, cruel and smug. "Exactly. And you can't do a damn thing about it, because everyone believes me, not you. Remember that." That night, Evelyn lay in bed with tears soaking her pillow. She thought of her father, of the lessons he taught her. Trust is everything. Betrayal destroys more than money. It destroys the soul. She thought of Clara's laugh, Richard's sneer, the whispers behind closed doors. Her life looked perfect from the outside, but inside she was trapped in a cage of cruelty and lies. And she knew, though she hadn't yet decided how, that one day she would break free. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The news hit Evelyn like a storm. A letter arrived one gray morning, delivered by a man in a suit who wouldn't meet her eyes. She tore it open at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling. It was from Richard's lawyer. Petition for divorce. Her eyes scanned the words. Richard was demanding half of her fortune, half of the empire her father had built, half of the company's shares that bore her family's name, half of everything. Her stomach dropped. She read the papers again and again, praying she had misunderstood. But the words were clear. Richard wasn't just leaving her, he was trying to strip her of her legacy. The door opened behind her. Richard walked in, humming as if nothing had happened. He saw the papers in her hand and smiled like a wolf. "Ah, I see you've read the good news," he said. "Good news?" Evelyn whispered. "You're divorcing me? You want half of what my father left me?" Richard poured himself coffee, calm and casual. "Correction. I deserve half. I've put up with you long enough. I built the image, the respect, the name we carry in public. Without me, you'd still be daddy's little girl hiding in a mansion. I earned this." Evelyn's voice cracked. "You can't possibly believe that." He stepped closer, towering over her. His smile vanished, his eyes hard as steel. "Believe it? I know it. And I'll take it, Evelyn. I'll take everything. By the time I'm done, people will see you for what you really are. Cold, selfish, unfit. They'll laugh at the idea that you ever ran anything." Tears welled in her eyes. "How could you do this to me?" Richard leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "Because I can. And because you're too weak to stop me." The scandal spread like wildfire. Richard moved quickly, painting himself as the perfect husband, who had been abandoned by a greedy, heartless wife. At charity events, he told sympathetic listeners, "I gave Evelyn everything. Love, devotion, my best years. But she pushed me away. She only cares about money," reporters ate it up. Headlines read, "Billionaire's wife cold-hearted? Husband left in tears." Evelyn watched in silence as her world turned upside down. Friends she had known for years stopped returning her calls. Invitations to luncheons and galas vanished. When she entered a room, whispers followed. "She's changed. She doesn't even smile anymore. Poor Richard, he deserves better." Clara played her part perfectly. One afternoon, Evelyn attended a small gathering, trying to keep her head high. Clara was already there, sitting close to Richard, her hand on his arm as though offering comfort. When Evelyn approached, Clara rushed to her with a hug. "Oh, Evie," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "I just don't understand what's happening. Poor Richard is heartbroken. And you look so cold. Don't you care about your marriage?" Evelyn pulled away, stunned. "Clara, you know the truth. You know what he's done." Clara shook her head sadly, her eyes shining with fake pity. "All I know is Richard has been nothing but kind, and you've been distant. People are starting to worry about you," Evelyn Richard added with a heavy sigh. "She's not well, Clara. She hasn't been for a long time. I've tried to help, but she pushes me away." Gasps filled the room. Evelyn's face burned. She wanted to scream, but the words stuck in her throat. Every eye in the room looked at her with suspicion, not sympathy. Clara rubbed her back as though comforting her, whispering just loud enough for others to hear, "It's okay, sis. We'll get you through this." But Evelyn felt the knife twist deeper. At home that night, she sat at her father's old desk, her head in her hands. Her phone buzzed with message after message, but none were from real friends. Only gossip, rumors, and reporters hungry for her side of the story. Richard strolled into the room, loosened tie, drink in hand. He grinned when he saw her hunched over. "Rough night?" he mocked. She glared at him. "You've poisoned everyone against me." Even Clara. My own sister Richard sipped his drink. "Clara's smarter than you. She knows which side wins. And believe me, Evelyn, I always win. You're destroying me." He leaned against the desk, his face inches from hers. "That's the idea. And the best part? You're doing half the work for me. Look at you, isolated, crying, desperate. You look unstable, just like I told everyone." Her hands shook with rage. "You're a monster," he chuckled. "Maybe, but I'm a monster with lawyers, charm, and an audience. You're just a broken little woman no one believes." Evelyn fought to keep her composure in public, but the humiliation grew unbearable. At church, old friends avoided sitting near her. At the grocery store, people whispered as she passed. Even the staff at her own company seemed colder, distant. Everywhere she turned, she felt the walls closing in. One evening, desperate for answers, Evelyn called the family's longtime accountant, Mr. Green, a man her father had trusted. She begged him to meet privately. When they sat down in his office, Evelyn clasped her hands and said, "Please, you know the truth. Tell me Richard has no claim. Tell me my father's will is secure." But Mr. Green avoided her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. Richard has provided compelling evidence that you've been negligent with the estate. It doesn't look good." Evelyn's chest tightened. "That's impossible. You know me. You know I've been careful." Mr. Green shifted uncomfortably. "Sometimes appearances matter more than facts. And Richard, well, he's very persuasive." Her heart sank. "He paid you, didn't he? He bought your testimony." Green's silence was answer enough. Evelyn left the office in a daze. Her husband had bribed the one man who could prove her innocence. Now even the law was tilting in Richard's favor. She sat in her car, staring at the papers in her lap. Tears blurred her vision, but inside her sorrow, something darker stirred. If Richard thought she would stay broken forever, he was wrong. Days blurred into weeks, each one worse than the last. Evelyn tried to hold her head high, but the gossip followed her like a shadow. The newspapers called her heartless and unfit. Television anchors speculated about her fragile state of mind. Online, strangers mocked her as the cold billionaire's daughter who couldn't keep a husband. And Richard was everywhere, smiling for cameras, giving interviews, playing the victim. Richard set his glass down and leaned back, eyes gleaming with cruelty. Because this isn't just about money, Evelyn. It's about power. I want to see you broken. I want everyone to see you as weak as I know you are. You're evil, he laughed. No, I'm smart. You're the one who's weak. You inherited a fortune, but you don't deserve it. I deserve it, and I'll take it, piece by piece, friend by friend. Until you have nothing left, Evelyn's voice shook. One day, people will see the truth. Richard leaned forward, sneering. By the time they do, you'll already be destroyed. And I'll be the one they pity, the noble man who tried to love a woman who couldn't love anyone. The cruelty didn't stop at home. At the next board meeting of her father's company, Evelyn walked in expecting to command respect. Instead, she found whispers and sidelong glances. Richard had been there first, spreading his poison. A senior board member cleared his throat and said carefully, Mrs. Carter, we're concerned. Richard tells us you've been struggling emotionally. Perhaps it would be wise for you to step back, at least temporarily, until you're well. Evelyn's heart clenched. She looked around the room at men and women her father had trusted, people who had once looked at her with admiration. Now they looked at her as if she were fragile glass, about to shatter. She stood tall, though her knees trembled. I am not unstable, she said firmly. Don't you dare let him manipulate you. But her words sounded desperate, even to her own ears. Richard had won this round. When she returned home, Richard was waiting. How was the meeting? He asked, feigning innocence. You poisoned them against me, she snapped. He grinned, slow and cruel. Of course I did. And it worked. You should have seen your face just now. Red, trembling, desperate. Exactly what they expected. You're making this easier for me, Evelyn. Her hands balled into fists. You'll regret this. He stepped closer, his voice a whisper of venom. No, you will, and soon. The next blow came swiftly. Evelyn's lawyer called with grim news. Richard has lined up a witness, Mr. Green, the accountant. He claims you've mismanaged funds, signed documents without reading, and put the estate at risk. Evelyn's breath caught. That's a lie. Green knows I've done everything by the book. Her lawyer hesitated. I believe you. But Green has paperwork, records, and it looks bad. Her heart sank. She remembered Green's uneasy eyes, his silence. Richard had gotten to him, bribed him, bought his testimony. Without solid evidence to counter this, the lawyer warned, the court may side with Richard. Evelyn sat in silence, the phone heavy in her hand. She felt the walls close tighter, her world shrinking, her father's legacy slipping through her fingers. That night, alone in her bedroom, Evelyn broke down. She wept until her chest ached. Everything she had trusted, her marriage, her sister, her friends, even the family accountant, was gone. Richard had taken them all, and still he wanted more. But through the tears, a spark lit inside her, a small, fierce spark. Richard thought she was weak. He thought she would stay broken. But Evelyn knew one thing her husband had forgotten. Her father hadn't raised a coward. She wiped her face, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to the empty room, You may have fooled the world, Richard, but you won't fool me. Not forever, Evelyn thought she had reached her limit, but Richard found new ways to break her. One bright Saturday morning, he packed his bags in front of her, whistling like a man heading on vacation. Evelyn stood in the doorway, silent, clutching the banister for balance. Where are you going? She asked, though she already knew. Richard zipped his suitcase and smiled. Out of here. I'm done living in this mausoleum with you. Don't worry, though. I'll make sure you're remembered as the greedy wife who couldn't keep her man. You're leaving me. Leaving? He laughed bitterly. No, Evelyn. I'm upgrading. I have a new life waiting. You'll rot here, alone, watching the papers call you a lunatic. Her chest tightened. You can't destroy me like this. I still have friends, allies. Richard cut her off. Friends? Don't kid yourself. They're my friends now. They pity me, Evelyn. Poor Richard. betrayed by a cold, selfish wife. That's the story, and everyone believes it. You'll end up a broke nobody, forgotten. With that, he wheeled his suitcase out the door, humming as if nothing had happened. Evelyn stood frozen, listening to the sound of the car engine fade down the driveway. For days, silence filled the mansion. The air felt heavy, like grief itself had moved in. Evelyn drifted from room to room, replaying his words until they echoed louder than her own heartbeat. One evening, while scrolling the news on her phone, her stomach dropped. There was Richard smiling on the arm of a younger woman at a rooftop party. The caption read, "Richard Carter steps out with stunning companion. Has he moved on from Evelyn?" Evelyn stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it. And then came the real knife. She zoomed in on the photo. The woman wasn't a stranger. It was Clara, her own sister. Evelyn's breath caught. The room spun. She gripped the edge of the couch, bile rising in her throat. Clara, who had hugged her, pretended to care, whispered poison in her ear, was now on Richard's arm in public. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. 2 days later, Clara came by the mansion as if nothing had changed. She carried flowers and set them on the kitchen counter. "Evie, you look terrible." "Are you even eating?" Clara said sweetly. Evelyn stared at her. "I saw the pictures." Clara blinked innocently. "Pictures? Don't play dumb. You and Richard, at that party, smiling like you've been together for years." Clara hesitated, then sighed, tilting her head. "I didn't mean for you to find out that way. But Richard, he needs me now. You pushed him away, Evie. Someone had to be there for him." Evelyn's hands trembled. "You're my sister. And you're selfish," Clara shot back, her voice sharpening. "You hoard money, love, everything. Richard deserves better, and I deserve better than living in your shadow. Maybe this is finally my chance." Evelyn staggered back, stunned. Her own blood had chosen Richard, and wasn't ashamed to say it. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her father's old study. The air smelled of leather and wood polish, like it had when he was alive. She pulled a photo of him from the shelf, his stern but kind face looking back at her. "Daddy," she whispered, tears streaming, "I don't know how much more I can take. They've taken everything from me, my husband, my sister, my name. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just give up." But then she remembered his words, spoken long ago when she was a teenager, crying over a lost friendship. "Integrity outlasts deception, Evie. Liars win for a while, but truth stands when everything else falls." She closed her eyes, clutching the frame. The words sank deep into her heart. Number. She wouldn't give up. Not yet. A week later, while going through old files in the safe, Evelyn found something she had forgotten existed. A plain brown envelope, sealed tight, with her father's handwriting on the front. "For Evelyn, only if you are betrayed." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a copy of her prenuptial agreement, signed by Richard years ago, ironclad and clear. Richard had no claim to her fortune. Alongside it was something even more explosive. Documents proving Richard had committed fraud in several business deals, shifting money illegally through shell companies. Evelyn gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. This was it, the weapon her father had left her, the silent safeguard against betrayal. She placed the papers back into the envelope and held it close to her chest. For the first time in months, a flicker of hope stirred inside her, but she couldn't act yet, not while Richard was watching. No, she would wait. She would let him gloat, let him believe he had already won. And when the time was right, she would strike. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror that night. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with grief, but behind them, something stronger burned. She whispered to her reflection, "You think I'm broken, Richard. But you're wrong. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." From that day forward, Evelyn changed. Outwardly, she looked weaker than ever. She moved slower, spoke softer, and kept her eyes down. In public, she seemed like a woman broken beyond repair. But inside, she carried the secret envelope like armor. Her father's words rang in her ears, steadying her steps. Richard noticed the change. He mistook it for defeat. One evening, he returned to the mansion to collect more of his belongings. He strutted through the front door without knocking, whistling a tune. Evelyn sat on the couch with a book open in her lap, though she hadn't been reading. "You look pitiful," Richard said with a smirk. "I almost feel sorry for you." Almost Evelyn closed the book gently. "I'm tired, Richard. I don't have the strength to fight anymore." His eyes lit up with cruel delight. "Finally, you're admitting it. You're beaten." She gave a small nod. "Maybe you were right. Maybe I was never strong enough." Distracted. When Richard and Clara flaunted their new life, she offered no protest. People whispered that Evelyn Carter was finished, broken, defeated, and that was exactly what she wanted them to think. Behind closed doors, she tucked the envelope into a hidden compartment in her father's desk. Every night she would take it out, run her fingers over the seal, and remind herself, "This is my weapon. My time will come." One evening Richard called her. His voice dripped with arrogance. "You should hear the things people say about you now," he mocked. "They laugh at how far you've fallen. Even the board thinks you're pathetic. Do you know what that makes me, Evelyn? It makes me the hero, the man who endured your cruelty and came out stronger. The judge will eat it up." Evelyn kept her tone calm, even bored. "If that's what you believe, Richard," he chuckled, "I don't just believe it. I know it. When this is over, you'll be nothing. Just a faded memory." She hung up the phone, placed it on the desk, and whispered to the empty room, "Enjoy your victory while you can." The stage was set. Richard was blind with overconfidence. Clara was drunk on her new role, and the world had written Evelyn off as a weak woman who couldn't fight. But Evelyn knew the truth. She was no longer broken. She was waiting. And when the courtroom doors opened, she would unleash the envelope that would end Richard's reign of cruelty in one devastating stroke. The courthouse steps were swarming with reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones swung, and voices rose in a sea of questions. "Mr. Carter, is it true you're seeking half the Carter fortune? Do you think your wife is unstable? Is this about love or greed?" Richard Carter didn't flinch. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, he strode up the steps with the confidence of a king walking into his palace. He flashed a grin for the cameras, waved like a celebrity, and wrapped an arm around Clara, who lingered just behind him in a cream-colored dress. She kept her eyes down, pretending to be shy, but Evelyn could see the smirk tugging at her lips. "Today," Richard announced loudly, "truth will win. I've been a loyal husband for years, but my wife has left me no choice. I want what's fair, nothing more." The crowd ate it up. The clicks of cameras filled the air. Evelyn Carter arrived moments later, stepping quietly out of a black car. She wore a simple black suit, no jewelry, no makeup beyond the basics. Her posture was steady, her face calm. The reporters turned to her, shouting her name, but she said nothing. She just walked inside, clutching a small brown envelope in her hand. The courtroom was packed. Spectators filled the benches, journalists lined the back row, and the air buzzed with curiosity. Everyone had come to see the downfall of the so-called cold billionaire's wife. Judge Harrison entered, tall and stern, his robes flowing as he took his seat. The room quieted. "Court is now in session," the clerk called. Richard leaned back in his chair, smirking at Evelyn across the aisle. "This won't take long," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Evelyn met his eyes, her expression unreadable. She said nothing. Richard's lawyer, a slick man with silver hair, rose first. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is simple. My client, Richard Carter, has been wronged. For years he has endured emotional neglect, cruelty, and instability from his wife, Evelyn Carter. He has been patient, supportive, and forgiving. Yet she has treated him with coldness, pushing him away and mismanaging the fortune entrusted to her. My client seeks only what is rightfully his, half of the Carter estate, as compensation for years of sacrifice." He laid a thick stack of documents on the judge's bench. These are records of Mrs. Carter's negligence, signed contracts she ignored, and testimony from a trusted accountant proving her incompetence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Clara watched from her seat, her lips curved in a satisfied smile. Evelyn sat perfectly still. Her hands rested on her lap, the brown envelope hidden beneath them. Judge Harrison flipped through the documents, frowning. "Mrs. Carter, these are serious allegations. Do you have a response?" Richard's lawyer smirked. "She doesn't, Your Honor. She can't. The evidence speaks for itself." Richard leaned forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Your Honor, I love my wife. I gave her everything, but she's unstable. Ask anyone. She cries in public, forgets meetings, lashes out. I tried to help her, but I couldn't. Now all I want is justice." He glanced toward Evelyn with mock pity. "I hope she finds peace, but she's unfit to handle what her father left behind." Clara's hand brushed Richard's arm, a silent gesture of support. To the audience, they looked united, strong, righteous. Finally, Evelyn rose. She moved slowly, deliberately, her envelope in hand. "Your Honor," she said softly, her voice steady but clear, "I have one thing to present." Richard chuckled under his breath. "Here we go," he muttered. She walked to the bench and handed the envelope to Judge Harrison. He opened it, pulled out the papers, and began to read. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then unexpectedly, the judge let out a short laugh. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. Richard's smile faltered. "What's so funny?" he demanded. Judge Harrison's eyes narrowed. "What's funny, Mr. Carter, is your audacity. Did you think the court wouldn't recognize an ironclad prenuptial agreement?" He held up the first document. "This is your signature, is it not?" Richard's face drained of color. That's old. It doesn't matter." "It matters very much," Judge Harrison snapped. "This agreement clearly states you waived all rights to your wife's inheritance, fortune, and company shares. You signed it before the marriage, witnessed and notarized. And yet here you stand, demanding half of what you are not entitled to. This is deception, plain and simple." Gasps filled the room again. Reporters scribbled faster. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her face paling. Judge Harrison pulled out another set of papers. "And here, financial records, fraud, embezzlement. Shell companies tied to your name, Mr. Carter. Not only are you trying to rob your wife, but you've been stealing from others as well." He dropped the papers onto the bench with a sharp thud. "Disgraceful!" Richard shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. Lies! She planted those." "Sit down," the judge barked. Richard hesitated, then slammed back into his seat, seething. "And as for you, Miss Clara," Judge Harrison continued, his gaze shifting to Evelyn's sister, "there are communications here, emails, text messages, proving your collusion. You conspired with Richard Carter to undermine your sister, to spread lies about her mental state, to damage her reputation. Shameful. Absolutely shameful." Clara's face burned red. "That's not true. I was only—" "Silence!" the judge roared. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, voices rising in shock. Reporters leaned forward, capturing every detail. Evelyn stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. For the first time in months, she felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. She had been silent, patient, waiting for this moment, and now the truth was out. Judge Harrison's voice boomed. "Mr. Carter, your petition for half of this estate is not only denied, it is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, your fraudulent actions will be referred to the authorities for investigation. You may leave this courtroom today, but you will not leave unscathed." Richard's jaw clenched. He looked around wildly, as if searching for support, but found only glares and whispers. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by panic. Clara reached for his hand, but he shoved her away, hissing, "This is your fault." She gasped, her composure crumbling. For the first time, the audience saw her for what she was. Not a sweet sister, but a traitor caught in the act. The judge leaned back, his expression firm. "Mrs. Carter, the court recognizes your integrity in this matter. Despite slander, betrayal, and manipulation, you remain steady. Let the record show that integrity triumphs where deception fails." Evelyn bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor." When the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted. Reporters surged toward Evelyn, shouting questions. "How did you know about the prenup? Did you plan this all along?" What do you think of your husband's fraud? But Evelyn walked calmly through the chaos, her face serene. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Behind her, Richard was swarmed, not with praise but with accusations. Cameras flashed in his face, reporters shouting about fraud, lies, betrayal. Clara trailed behind him, pale and shaken, no longer the supportive sister, but a disgraced conspirator. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Evelyn paused on the courthouse steps, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. For the first time in months, she felt free. Her life had been scarred. She had lost friends, endured humiliation, been betrayed by her own blood. But she had not lost herself. Richard had tried to strip her bare. Instead, he had exposed himself. As she descended the steps, she whispered to herself, words only she could hear. Greed destroys the greedy. Betrayal consumes the betrayer. Integrity outlasts it all. Richard Carter never recovered. His reputation shattered, his finances drained by legal battles and fraud investigations. He faded into disgrace. Clara, exposed and shunned, found herself abandoned by the very man she had betrayed her sister for. Evelyn Carter, scarred but unbroken, rebuilt her life brick by brick. She returned to her father's company, not as a fragile widow, but as a woman who had survived betrayal and risen stronger. And though the pain lingered, so did the lesson. Patience, truth, and dignity are weapons sharper than any lie.